This week, violent mass protests engulfed the U.S. city of Charlotte in North Carolina, prompting authorities to declare a state of emergency and impose a curfew. Demonstrations have now raged there for 5 consecutive nights. The first 3 nights were the most violent and included the fatal shooting of a protester, allegedly by another civilian. Activists from the Black Lives Matter movement took to the streets on Tuesday night following the police shooting of a black man. Keith Lamont Scott, a 43-year-old father of 7, was shot and killed in a parking lot in Charlotte during a manhunt for another person. Officers claim Scott posed a deadly threat when he got out of his vehicle with a weapon. His family, however, have a very different account. They say he was sitting in his car when the police approached him. And after initially refusing to release footage of the incident, police have now buckled to mounting public pressure. I should warn you, you might find the following images disturbing.
The officers were absolutely mistaken when they said that he was holding a gun, and that when they were yelling that he was to put down his gun. His arms are by his side, and there appears to be nothing in either of his hands. Even more so, the fact that as they have just shot and killed him, they then put an officer is seen putting a knee in his back and handcuffing him and allowing him to bleed to death. The video proves what everybody believed and what his wife had stated, which is that he was unarmed. Also, the video shows that the officer who shot him was a white male, not a black officer, which was originally reported. I believe that it's very difficult to believe a police department that has already been inconsistent in what they've reported in this specific case. And until the blood is washed from the state's hands, we will continue to see cities lighting up and rising up and fighting for justice. These are righteous resistance, and they will continue until we have justice.
Throughout the days of protests, crowds were seen holding signs calling for an end to what they call police terror, as well as justice for those killed by officers. Demonstrators also carried banners reading "Don't shoot," as fears of being unlawfully shot by police do grow among the black community. On Saturday, police finally released their footage of the shooting of Keith Scott, a key demand of protesters. However, people continued to gather in demonstrations on Saturday night. Now, protest violence led the governor of North Carolina to declare a state of emergency and deploy the National Guard. Humvees were seen downtown where some of the violence took place, and armed troops in camouflage also seen throughout the city. Authorities say the vehicles and extra officers were there to ensure public order. But a former Baltimore police officer told us here at RT that police actions are just creating a sense of injustice.
The crux of one of the problems is that we have a fear-based legal system. So anything that an officer does in the name of reasonably being able to articulate that they were afraid means that they're not going to have a case sustained against them, so that it completely eliminates any sense of justice if somebody just has to say that they're afraid. And with this incident too, like, we're even focusing on whether he had a gun or a book. it's completely irrelevant. A gun is not illegal, and the book is not illegal in that state. The protesters are saying police end police violence, and the police show up and bring violence. The police get violent, and then the protesters respond. And I don't know what else you're supposed to do when you are being, for instance, surrounded by people who showed up in riot gear with helmets and weapons and bats and batons. These aren't the protesters that are showing up looking for a fight. It's the police.
Protests in solidarity with the people of Charlotte spread across parts of the country. In New York, hundreds took to the streets to vent their anger over the killing. They shouted, "Charlotte, we've got your back." And solidarity protests were also held in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where an unarmed black man was killed by police last week. And protests against police brutality were also held this week in Dallas, Texas.